Welcome to Feedback Studio. Now in this video we're going to be looking at how you can trace the original sources of passages that Feedback Studio has highlighted in its Similarity Report. If you're not already familiar with accessing the Similarity Report and looking at the Similarity Report toolbar, then it might be worth you watching the video viewing the Similarity Report before you watch this video. In that video, we looked at how Feedback Studio shows you an overview of any passages that match one of the countless sources on Feedback Studio's databases, and which might therefore count as academic misconduct. As we said in that video though, the similarity percentage is not in itself enough justification for investigation of academic misconduct. You need to look a little more carefully at the Similarity Report and understand what it is telling you. Feedback Studio offers a number of ways in which you can explore any highlighted similarity in more detail. To begin with, we're going to look at these three buttons in the Similarity Report toolbar on the right. To begin with, let's look at this first one, which is the Match Overview. This list shows you all the highlighted passages sorted according to their location in the essay. For this example, we can see that there are 26 separate passages that have been highlighted in the essay, and I can quickly navigate to any of them by clicking on the relevant number. This will not only take us to the point in the essay where the match occurs, but bring up a window showing the matched source in context. If you wanted to see more context, then you can click on this side-by-side icon, which will bring up the original source in a panel on the right, against which you can compare the essay you're looking at. Handily, any part match that has been found between this source and the essay you're looking at is highlighted in red. Now you can close this panel by clicking on the X in the top right corner of it, taking you back to the Match Overview. So, here in the Match Overview again, the passages in the essay are matched with those in the Match Overview by number and by colour. Each entry shows you a quick indication of the source, what kind of source it is, and what percentage of the essay itself has been matched. In this example, we can easily see that the biggest passage that has been highlighted is about 3%. Those entries between 10 and 26 are less than 1%. Now we can see more information about the sources by clicking on this arrow on the far right. In here, we can see this particular passage from the essay has been found replicated in more than one source. In fact, elements of this passage have been found in a number of different sources. And each time I click on any of these sources, again a context window will appear in the essay itself so that you can compare them. And just to note here, this Exclude button at the bottom is very handy, but we'll talk more about this in the video Excluding Sources. Moving on to the next toolbar button, this panel shows you all sources. Now, if the Match Overview shows you the number of occurrences of matches in the essay, this window focuses more on the number of times the same source has been matched. For example, the Match Overview tells us that the biggest single matched passage in the essay accounts for about 3% of the whole. In the All Sources panel, we can see that 5% of the whole essay has been matched to a single source. And clicking on that source, we can see that this 5% is comprised of a 3% passage in one place, a 2% passage in another, and so on. And we can easily navigate between each of these passages in the essay by simply clicking on the sources. Again, just to note the little Exclude Sources button, which we talk about in the video on excluding sources. The next button, which is the Filter button, is where we can change the settings for what Feedback Studio highlights as a match. And in this particular example, you may have noticed that a number of the matches have been direct quotations. This is a more common occurrence in maybe social sciences or humanities subjects where direct quotations are commonly used, as opposed to many of the sciences where paraphrases are more common. Now, where there is a direct quotation that has been correctly referenced, well, obviously there's no question of academic misconduct, and as such it's possible to check this box here asking Feedback Studio to exclude quotes. This will exclude any matched passage that appears in quotation marks. If I apply this change now, you'll see that the 15% similarity in the report for this essay has immediately dropped to 7%. Now, this is a nice tool, but we need to emphasize that while Feedback Studio is very good at recognizing quotation marks, it will not check the use of academic conventions for you. A direct quote may be discounted because it appears inside quotation marks, but that doesn't mean that the passage has been correctly cited. And for this reason, this option is not normally selected when setting up the Turnitin assignment. A similar warning could be attached to the next filter, where you can exclude the bibliography. Now, selecting this option instructs Feedback Studio to look for a list of sources at the end of the essay and not to count this as part of the Similarity Report. Again, this can be a quite handy function for reducing the percentage similarity, but it won't check whether the use of referencing conventions is accurate, and neither does it account for the possibility that an entire bibliography may potentially have been copied from another source. At the same time, it doesn't make any distinction for the particular academic conventions being used. If I select the bibliography filter for this essay, for example, and apply the change, you'll notice it actually makes no difference at all to the similarity percentage. Now, this could mean that there's no bibliography at all, but in this case the reason is that the essay is using a particular kind of referencing, the MHRA style, which uses footnotes. Now, UEL has a broad commitment to using a Harvard form of referencing, but there are some variations, particularly when a program of study is following the standards of a professional, statutory or regulatory body with its own requirements. For example, to fit in with the expectations of the British Psychological Society, psychology programs may require the use of the American Psychological Society referencing system. Now, in this instance, you might want to check with your program leader about the right action to take for the use of an incorrect academic convention. Now, just below this, there's an option to exclude matches on the basis of their size. You may have noticed from the match overview that in this essay there are a lot of matches which account for less than 1% of the overall essay, and you might not think that these are worth including. A couple of things to note here though, and apologies if this sounds terribly obvious. The percentage size of a matched essay will depend entirely on the length of the essay. So, for example, in a short essay, a match of less than 1% may be a match of just 2 or 3 words. For a longer essay, less than 1% may account for much more. To illustrate this, if I exclude here sources of less than 1% in the essay, the Similarity Report immediately drops from 15% to 11%. However, if I exclude matches of less than 10 words, the Similarity Report only drops to 14%. This means that most of the matches that are showing up as less than 1% are still more than 10 words long, which is a pretty decent amount. And this is the reason we don't recommend including an exclusion filter when setting up a Feedback Studio assignment. And your use of this filter is largely a case of you using your own initiative, but if you do have any doubts, it's probably worth speaking to your program manager or director of teaching and learning. Now, this final button relates to the excluded sources, which we will talk more about in the video on excluding sources, so I'll leave that for the time being. But until then, there we have it. There's a really rich set of data here relating to the Similarity Report, which can help you make informed decisions about the integrity of the essay you're marking. It's important to note that the Similarity Report is an aid in making decisions about whether or not to refer an essay for investigation of academic misconduct. It does not determine or override UEL's policies on academic integrity, and if you're not already familiar with those, then it really is strongly recommended that you look them up before you do anything else.